This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z. I'm Matt Fonslow, and I have a real treat for you and, honestly, for me. We have Lake Speed Jr. on the podcast today, and if you don't recognize that name, hopefully you recognize his YouTube channel, the Motor Oil Geek. And if that doesn't ring a bell, he is also the owner of Speed Diagnostics. And he is really, to get straight to it, technically a tribologist or tribologist, depending. I've heard it said both ways.
Yeah, I've heard it both ways. I like the tribologist part. It's like it's friction, wear, lubrication. It's not tribe. It's not trib. It's tri. So that's all good.
I've heard it both ways, and I was kind of researching it a little bit before you came on, and honestly, it's both ways. But tribologist?
Well, I was really expecting you to say, if you don't recognize who my name is, you've got to recognize my dad, because my dad's the real celebrity, right? He's a race car driver, world champion. Yeah, I'm just a hack.
That occurred to me, but I was like, you must hear that all the time. So being like everybody else.
That's all good. It's all good. When you beat Ayrton Senna, you get to have that respect, right? You get to come first, because I haven't beat Ayrton Senna, but Dad did. So
that might be a great subject for another episode. Do you have a general service tech that you want to grow into your business, but you're lacking the path to get them there? Let Napa Autotech's apprentice program pave the way. Go to napaautotech.com for more details. Well, I think what's the most pressing question, is being your background in friction, is why is ice slippery?
Oh, man, you're throwing the Canadian question at me, right? We're going to get into curling here. How pressure generates heat, which causes it to melt. Is this lubrication? Yeah.
I'm Minnesota, so hockey is really important. And dude, I have so many questions. I have so many interests in this, not just like the friction and lubrication, but just the oil analysis. So I didn't mention it, but Speed Diagnostics is a company that you can send oil samples to, and you'll analyze them and send reports in English, not just strictly the chemical breakdowns. And I hate to call it like complicated. It is, if you're uneducated.
That's the thing. I got an email from a lady down in Australia, like just yesterday, that she's got this car. She really cares about it. And, there's been some issues. So she went and found one of the local Caterpillar dealerships, because Caterpillar places all around the world do oil analysis, and they're really good at it. But what they give you is data, because what they're expecting is that the person receiving that report is the analyst. It's no different than, going to the doctor's office, right? The doctor that tells you whether you're sick or not by looking at your blood results, he didn't go run the lab test. He's the doctor. He's not the lab technician. So that's what my role is. I'm not physically running the lab equipment. Yeah, that's not what I would want to do anyway. I'm the person that looks at that data and can tell you if your engine is healthy or well, or sick, right? That's what my job is. And so when the Caterpillar labs are running the stuff, they're assuming that there's going to be someone on the receiving end of that report that knows how to read that report and knows to make heads and tails of it. And really what happens with most of these situations is, one test result is like having one point of data. It doesn't really give you a clear picture. The trend analysis is what's really important, because yes, there are industry standard limits, say for iron, for example. So you go to any lab anywhere in the world, if your iron levels come back over 105 parts per million, they're going to flag it, because that's like the universal standard. But the reality is, let's say you have a Porsche, like a 1999 Porsche. This got an M96 engine, that's aluminum block engine with alucil cylinder. There's not a lot of iron in that engine. If you have 1,000 miles on that engine, and it comes back at 30 parts per million iron, you have a big problem. But there's not a lab on the planet that would flag that. But that's where I come in, and I look at it and say, no, I'm flagging this report before I send it to you, because you have a problem. And especially if that 30 parts per million of iron happens to be coupled with, say, 28 parts per million silicon and let's call it 18 parts per million aluminum, you have bore scoring. So that's the difference between what's been usually available to most people is data without any kind of frame of reference for it. And what we try to do is give people a report that I always say, if you can navigate a stoplight, green, yellow, red, you know what to do when the colors changes. You can read one of these reports and it makes sense to you because if everything's green, everything's good. Just keep on driving. If you see something that's yellow, it means you need to pay attention. You may have to make a decision. If you see something that's red, you need to stop. It's that simple.
Yeah, and I'm guessing like the technician levels, when they're getting these reports, they're really focusing on a few things like glycol, maybe water, and maybe iron if they know enough to look, or maybe zinc. But after that, like some of the stuff you're rattling off, I'm guessing nobody really looks at. And then if they're sending you a sample, typically from a technician standpoint, they're either at their wit's end trying to figure out what's wrong. Like, does this thing have a head gasket leak, or is there somehow oil degradation they don't know about? Or why did this engine fail? They're not doing it like you're saying, where maybe more regularly, maybe not every oil change, but once a year or so, sending samples to build up this trend. That's not happening. And that would be a powerful, powerful asset. And I guess one thing, we try to be really big about evidence-based, right? In everything we do.
That's the key, right? Is that there's lots of speculation, right? That's one great thing about the computers today. You can plug in and you can get a lot of information really quickly, out of the OBD2 ports, which is great. But there are things happening inside the engine that you just don't know without pulling the engine out. And that's a big cost, a big inconvenience to the customer. And if you can take a sample and then know that, okay, the data here says that this engine probably has a head gasket leak. And we can say that because let's take the oil analysis data and let's compare that to what we can physically observe in the engine. So we can go over there and look at the radiator, the top up overflow tank, and we realize that level's coming down. But we look at the oil, look at the dipstick, and it's not milky. We don't see any water coolant in the oil. But we don't see any oil or anything in the coolant. The radiator seems fine. We don't see any leaks. Okay, but we take that physical evidence that we can see pretty easily in the shop, and we match that up to the oil analysis report. That oil analysis report comes back, and there's no water and there's no glycol in the sample, but there's potassium and sodium in the sample. That's a head gasket leak. What's happening is you've got coolant going into the combustion chamber. The temperatures are high enough in the combustion chamber to evaporate all the water and burn the glycol. Glycol will easily burn. It's a straight chain molecule. It will burn and it will be gone. And you will not see it in the oil analysis. But the potassium and sodium, the residual, because that's the additives that are in the coolant, they show up. They're in the oil. That's how you know. Now you can go to the customer and say, hey, you know what? We're seeing the coolant level dropping. We see this. This means you got a head gasket leak. We're going to have to pull the engine out and replace the head gaskets. And then you can go to the customer with data and tell them, this is why you have to have your car gone for this long. This is why it's going to cost you this much. We can go in there and fix this problem. But we're going to fix it before it becomes catastrophic, because you keep letting it go. Now you're going to lose the bottom end of the engine, and you're going to put an alarm block in it, or you're going to have to go get a replacement engine, and it's going to be a really way worse day than what your situation already is.
Yeah, that's like a perfect example.
This is the stuff I live on a daily basis, right?
Yeah, I would say speaking from the base, a loose comparison might be, sticking with the head gasket analogy, is there is the blue juice. There's a device that you put this chemical in that reacts to carbon dioxide. You suck the gases out of the cooling system through it. If there's carbon dioxide in there, which is a byproduct of combustion, it'll turn from blue to green or yellow. But that's one gas out of how many? Really, potentially 4, really 3. So if you use an exhaust gas analyzer, same test, you're picking up 2 more gases, CO and hydrocarbons, right? And that's just another angle or more evidence to pick up, more data points. And that what you're talking about is just, I think that's a perfect example, is how you would normally test won't show up. looking at it visually, maybe tasting it, you won't pick it up. But you're talking about like the salts.
And the thing is, it can catch it early, probably before, the gas analyzer can. I've seen that before where it changes color, and I get that. I've not done a side-by-side comparison to say, okay, when you've got a leaky head gasket, at what point is there enough stuff getting into the coolant where you can analyze the coolant and know that there's combustion gases getting into it, versus every time that piston goes down and it's creating negative pressure in there, is it able to suck some of that stuff in there? Or are we having some abnormal combustion going on that's causing it to lift that head gasket slightly? And now we're just getting little bitty squirts. Those are the things that, I've not done the side by side. I just live in the oil analysis world. That's the space that I live in because, my backstory is I worked for an oil company for 15 years. I worked for a NASCAR team for 13 years, and we formulated oils and we did all this stuff. And oil analysis was our tool that we used to know what was going on. We made decisions based on the data that it could give us. We used, tearing apart engines and looking at things. And we used the dyno data. We use a bunch of different data streams, not just only one, to make good decisions. And it helped us win races and win championships. And then when we shared that experience with our customers, who are buying the oil from us, it became pretty clear that kind of service just did not exist for them. That we tried the labs that were out there, have them do the work for them, and they couldn't get that. They couldn't get data that they could, and sometimes even trust. Unfortunately, sad to say that. Other times they could get data they could trust, but there was no interpretation. It didn't make any sense to them. They just had a bunch of numbers. And now what do I do with it? Over time, I realized that there was a place for that. And then I left and formed my own company to be an independent. I have a bunch of friends in the oil industry. I do some consulting work for several different companies. They come to me because I know things. I still like to stay involved in some the cutting edge technology is. But at the end of the day, I'm an independent. I don't answer to any one oil company. That way I can only answer to my customers, and I'm here to help them and give them the best data, the best guidance I can based on the information that I have. But if I don't have oil analysis data, I don't have any information to give them.
It's awesome. And I think it would be vastly more accurate because by the time we're sniffing the cooling system, there's a complaint. There's a reason we're doing that. The way you would be doing it is the residuals are going to stay there much longer, if not indefinitely. Whereas in our world, or I shouldn't say in our world, but with our testing at that level, they wouldn't necessarily stay. And by that time, it's already fairly catastrophic, where you would have probably picked up on it months and months ago, certainly many, 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 many engine hours ago.
We can catch that stuff pretty quickly. I mean, fuel dilution. The two main culprits that I see in modern engines, fuel dilution is number one because the quality of fuel out there is pretty poor. And a lot of people don't use, either top tier fuel or they don't use a proper, like a polyethylamine, a PEA type fuel detergent additive on a regular basis. And I don't mean every tank full. I just mean like once every oil change, right? Do something to keep the injectors clean. And on direct injection engines, it's really, really important. We see it a lot with the DI engines because the injector's in the combustion chamber. When you turn the engine off, it wants to bake that fuel in there. And when it has deposits, it can't atomize the fuel as well. If the fuel doesn't atomize, it can't vaporize, which leads to more fuel dilution, which leads to more problems like LSPI, the abnormal combustion. You see more wear. All bad things happen in the DI engine when the injectors are dirty. Just everything's bad if they're dirty.
Napa Autotech training sessions are being conducted day and night in a town near you. This training caters to every level within your organization, be it a mechanical assistant, a mechanical specialist, a technology specialist, or a driver safety calibration specialist. Imagine a one-stop shop training partner in Napa Autotech that will lead your team to a path to greatness. Autotech's entry-level Build-A-Tech classes convert the untapped potential of your new hires into money-making mechanical specialists. Autotech's higher-level tech update classes introduce specialists to the world of ever-changing technologies, which prevents your shop from getting technologically stagnant. Remember, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. And, turning to the front of the store, the AutoTech Service Advisor class is an awesome way to hone your client advocate skill set, ultimately benefiting the customer through an improved vehicle repair experience. But it doesn't stop there. Imagine an electric vehicle class that takes your specialist well past the mundane, yet necessary safety topics. Well, it's here. AutoTech's EV Ready training is a week-long curriculum that takes participants through a hands-on experience involving hybrids and electric vehicles. The session kicks off with the use of PPE and proper tooling while touching on required OSHA regulations. Then, the students dive into the lab vehicles to gain knowledge of the common high-voltage components on EV and hybrid vehicles and their function. Attendees will be taken on a path exposing them to different electric vehicle manufacturers to compare component form and location. Additionally, information about Level 1 and Level 2 charging systems will be included, along with a quick look at DC to DC charging. The operation and maintenance of subsystems are explored, including the different modes of Tesla operations, and so much more. So what are you waiting for? Commit to taking your business to the next level with Napa AutoTech training. If it can't vaporize it, you're going to compound the quenching effect because it's not vaporized. And they're trying to form a pocket to avoid as much quenching as possible on the cylinder walls. And if you can't keep that vaporized in that pocket, it makes it out to the cylinder walls, condenses, compounds. It's just a compound effect.
Absolutely. So we see that quite often. It was neat as you can see the results, right? Somebody sends in a sample, they're high fuel dilution, and you tell them to go put a bottle of Techron Complete fuel system cleaner in there, and they send it back another sample 5,000 miles later, and it's chopped, the fuel dilution from 3% to 0.5%. And it's like, wow, look, your wear rate dropped dramatically because you're not wearing the engine out. Because like you said, when you don't have good atomization, you end up getting more quenching. You get fuel on the cylinder wall, and the piston ring rubbing against the cylinder wall is the number one source of wear in the engine. And fuel's a terrible lubricant compared to oil, So these are these little things. And of course, with diesels, one of the things we see a lot right now are excessive regens with diesel engines. And a lot of that is down to the ash content in the oil, that a lot of people still want to run old school type oils with a high ash content in their brand new 2024 eco diesel. And what ends up happening is they get, regens every couple hundred miles. Well, those regens are just dumping fuel in the engine. So now you end up with 6, 7, 8% fuel dilution, which knocks the viscosity down, which increases wear in the engine. You see all these really, really bad things. And I get it, man. If you're a dude and you've got this big truck and you just spent really what you bought a house for 10 years ago on a truck, I understand your natural tendency is to go put some 1540 Rotella in it, Rodello or whatever one you like, because that's what people did. This putting in some kind of eco diesel oil that looks lighter and thinner and doesn't smell, and you're like, that can't be good. But the reality is some of these lower ash formulas is exactly what your after treatment system needs. And the reality is if you abuse the after treatment, it's going to hurt your engine. I feel like that is something that's those dots have not been connected in the minds of many owners, because I just see it all the time. You get the complaint about this thing's making oil, the thing regens all the time. And it's like, it's your oil that's doing it. It literally is your choice of oil.
Yeah. I like just that diagnostic value of what you're saying is if we recommend, we're sending samples to you, getting the reports back. Hey, start giving this some sort of field treatment, and then being able to come back with, look at the benefits, rather than, I recommend you put this in here, and there's really nothing to prove whether it worked or not, short of the car still runs, or it runs okay. It's not picking up misfires, something of that nature, where this is more hard, concrete data. Like, I'm showing you direct benefit of following this course of action. And I think that's what we need in this profession, because, not to go on an economics rant, but we are a credence good service, meaning we know the value of what we're doing better than the client can reasonably know. Probably very similar to what you're doing too. Like, the value you're providing me with this information better than I know and can reasonably know. The more honesty, the more upfront data I can give, the more evidence-based data I can provide, the better or the more trust I'm going to build with these clients.
It is an ecosystem. Even with all the testing we can do and the data we can pull from just 3 ounces of oil, we're still like that kid that's looking at the parade going by through a knot hole in the fence. We don't see the big picture. We don't know how often the engine's regenerating. We don't know where you're going to get fuel. We don't see how you drive the car, where you drive the car or the truck, what you're doing, what you're not doing. So what the value is, where it gets powerful, I should say, is when you get multiple samples, multiple points of data, and you marry that up with, hey, what's the coolant level? What other things about the vehicle that if I can establish a ecosystem, if you will, of physical data, things you can see and understand about the vehicle, and we can empower that customer with the used oil analysis data, the end goal is to help either the end customer, the technician, whoever it is that's physically with that vehicle, help them to understand what that vehicle is trying to tell them. Because they're all talking, right? They are all trying to tell us a story. This is just one of the ways of being able to listen. And if you can take multiple channels of data and put it together, you're going to end up with a clearer picture. And you said at the end of the day, that increases the value to the owner because now they can see, they can have confidence to either make this trip or to make the investment in changing these parts, not just going and buying a new one or trying to sell it to somebody else, max attack somebody else in the deal. They can understand what to do, how much it's going to cost them, why it costs them that much, and have the confidence to move forward. In the day, I think that's the big value that we can help the technician, we can help the customer, make sense of the situation, get to a good resolution sooner rather than later, saves them time, saves them money, and gives them more peace of mind in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I'm glad you brought that up.
I have a lot of Porsche customers, and this is the world we live in. It's a high value car that usually sees track time or something like that. And that peace of mind is a really big part of all of it. One, they want it to work. They don't want to have problems. So you want to avert any problems sooner rather than later. And no different than like when my dad goes to the racetrack. I want to do all this stuff because I don't want to see him get hurt. It's like, at the end of the day is, I want him to go have fun playing with his race car, but I don't want him to get hurt. And if there's anything I can do in my power to make sure we don't have any dramas and no one gets hurt, that's a big win.
One of the final questions has to be, in your mind, what is the biggest misunderstanding from, and I'm going to load this a little bit, from professionals in the field, auto mechanics, auto repair techs, mechanical specialists, technical specialists about motor oil?
Wow. It's really almost like a diversity of things. Some people think just oil is oil. Just put some oil in it. Just make sure you change it regularly and you're good. That there's not any differences between them. And that's really what I'm going to call the C- student route. Because there's some truth to it, right? If you just get a name brand oil and you put it in the vehicle, put it in the engine and you change it regularly, the chances of you having a lubrication problem are pretty low. That's true. But if you're trying to be the valedictorian, if you're trying to be the A student, that's not how you're going to get there.
The professional. We're supposed to be professional. So
right. And the thing is, there are some customers that's what they just make it easy. I don't want to think about it. I don't care. But the reality is, every time you do work on that car, every time you change the oil, there's an opportunity for some kind of contamination or something to go wrong or something to get over torqued or left loose. The reality is, the less time you can touch it, the better it is. On the flip end, when you do oil right, there are some oils that are really good. But I think some people can also go to the extreme and they feel like, well, you have to use this uber niche synthetic oil that's only made in Germany. No, there's as much bad marketing on that side as there is, C- information. Just put regular oil in it and change it all the time. Somewhere in the middle is the real truth. And the real question is, what do you, either as shop owner, service technician, or car owner, what's your goal? If your goal is to just, C's get degrees, that's what you want to be, then cool. Follow the old school advice. If you want to be first in class, if you want to be ahead of the pack, you're going to need to do things different. And that's going to require having data, making data-driven decisions. Because, not to give away one of my upcoming videos, the price tag of a product doesn't always guarantee the results that product's going to give you. And it goes both ways. The highest priced product doesn't always give you the best results. The lowest priced product doesn't always give you the worst results. If you don't have data, you don't have knowledge. You're purely operating on speculation. And I hate that. That's not the world that I lived in, right? Working at Joe Gibbs Racing, winning races and winning championships was not by accident. And we didn't do it based off hunches. We had tons of engineers. We did tons of testing. And yeah, sometimes you did have to make a quick judgment call based on your gut. But your gut decision, that feeling, was formed off of tons of testing and data. You had a feel for that data so that when that situation came up, even though it was a gut decision, you didn't math it out. There was still data behind that decision. And that's how you win races. That's how you win championships. That's how you become first in class, best in field, by making data-driven decisions and using all the data, all the tools at your disposal to make good decisions, not just what is the most cost-effective, profit-motivated decision.
And I suppose to follow that up is filtration.
I'll say this. It's that same kind of thing. So Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you're not too hot, not too cold. You want it just right. There are people that just kind of dismiss filtration. Just put a filter on it. It's fine. Any old cheap thing will work. That definitely is not the case. I've seen some fleet vehicles here recently that we do some work, with a municipality, which is, that's very difficult. A lot of idle time and all that they chop their wear rate on all their engines in half just by changing the filters. They went from the budget cheap filter to a name brand filter. And it's like most things in life, there is a point of diminishing returns. So if your really cheap stuff is doing a really bad job, just going to a decent name brand product is going to move you way up in terms of return on investment, how much you're going to get for that change. But then, trying to get to that highest level, I would not rely on the marketing from those companies to try to make a decision. I would rely on data, used oil analysis, other things to give you feedback on which product actually works best from you. That's the key thing to me, is that what oil you use, what filter you use, let those be data-driven decisions based on feedback from your vehicle, where you live, how you drive, the fuels you use, the environment you operate in. Let that data form your decision, not what the marketing department is telling you their product does. In a lab, not where you live, not doing what you do, not with your vehicle. There's the big differences.
Excellent. I very much want to thank you for coming on. I want to respect your time here. I know you had a time constraint, and
I'd be happy to come back anytime. If everybody like this and they're like, don't ever have that guy back on, they give you all the thumbs down, well, then you don't got to worry about it, But if they say, hey, yeah, bring that guy back, I'd be happy to do it again sometime.
I really hope so. That would be great. I think there's a lot of stuff we can talk about. And like I said, the subject is extremely interesting to me. Even tribology itself is extremely interesting to me.
It's the funnest science. You can't even get a tribology degree in the United States. There's not a single college or university that actually teaches this stuff. The closest one is Auburn University has a minor in tribology. If you really want to be a tribologist and have like the letters after your name and have the paper that says that, you have to go to school outside the United States. Yeah, people give me a hard time. Like,
of all the sciences, though, the application of this is far, far greater than many that you can get.
The Harvard University, if you will, of tribology is Imperial College in London. The Brits are the ones who came up with the term tribology. A guy named Peter Jost had this report that they looked at, the efficiencies in manufacturing. How could British manufacturing become more efficient? And they recognized that what they ended up calling tribology was an area where they could really make massive gains. That was the area they should focus on. So they really got behind it. The British government, funded it, and they got serious about it. And there's all the good stuff with tribology. Most of that comes out of the UK. They really lead the way in that because they were the ones that invented it. Good on them for that. The US, it's just something that people don't know about it, but to me, it's the coolest of all the sciences because it blends in chemistry and physics at the same time. So you got to get a little bit of both. And being a jack of all trade, master of none kind of person, it's a field that fits me very well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep extending this out, but it makes me think of so many different things. Bubbles, so much power and energy in bubbles, and this would be part of tribology.
Interfacial relationships and surface tension and contact angles, all that kind of stuff is cool. And it's something that that actually really factors into lubricants is that what's the air release properties of the lubricant? That I can have an oil that actually visibly has foam on the surface that someone may say, well, that's no good. That oil's bad. I can see visible foam. Yeah, but there's no air in the oil. All of the air that's in the oil is going directly to the surface versus another one that has no foam on the surface, but all that air is trapped in the oil. It's not making its way up there. Well, that's no good because now that lubricant will be more spongy. This is the kind of stuff where it's hard to have a general conversation about this stuff because there are so many little details about the application that goes back to what I said at the framework before is what kind of student do you want to be? It's easy to be the C's get degrees kind of person. If you want to be the valedictorian, it's going to be a lot more work. But there's also more benefits that come along with being first in class than the last in class, right? So what do you want to be when you grow up? Then if you're really interested in being best of the best, tribology is one of the ways to get there. Obviously, it was a hidden advantage, for the guys at Joe Gibbs Racing. The stats were in the 8 years before Joe Gibbs Racing kind of got on to the tribology bandwagon and began applying it to the racing cars. They had won 0 championships in about 16 races. And then in the following 8 years, won like 54 races and 5 championships.
Wow, that is awesome. I love that stuff.
It's point of inflection. It's like, oh, wait, we found out about this. Oh, if it solved this one problem, what else can it solve? Let's apply it to everything. And next thing you know, it just takes off. And, there are rules in the NASCAR rule book because of things we did. And that's what makes you the happiest, right? I'm the Ray Evernham.
That is a compliment on compliments. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a Ray Evernham. I don't have, hundreds of pages of rules written because of me. Ray and Chad, some of those guys are the kings of that. Robert Yates, some of those other guys, they got the win, but we got a couple of them.
That is awesome. Well, this is Lake Speed Jr., the owner of Speed Diagnostics. And I'm not putting on a commercial here. I think you heard the evidence here. I think it's a good idea to start presenting our clients with the opportunity or just taking the opportunity of sending oil samples in on a regular basis, semi-regular basis to get a trend going and present our clients with even more data, more evidence-based testing and results, and then evidence-based recommendations. He has a website, speeddiagnostics.com, and he also has a YouTube channel, the Motor Oil Geek. I can't recommend you watch it enough. And again, sir, I really appreciate your time, and I really do hope you can come on and join me again, and we can keep talking about the effects of oil on a bowling alley or something like that.
Sounds good, man. Awesome. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Matt Fonslow, diagnosing the aftermarket A to Z on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Matt on your favorite listening app. He's very interested in what you have to say. Let him know what you'd like him to cover and come on the show. Matt is all for advancing the aftermarket. Find Matt Fonslow on social media and connect or on aftermarketradionetwork.com.